Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I'm joined today by Kim Andersack, and she is all things homeschool. I'm excited to have her here to just talk with me and walk us through aspects of homeschool education in the state of South Carolina. So, Kim, can you introduce yourself and tell me more about what you do in the world of homeschooling?
Okay, well, I am an homeschool association director. So when you decide you want to homeschool, you register with an accountability association, and there are about 30 associations like that in the state, and I am one of them. But I also wear another hat for homeschooling that kind of tries to build bridges between the groups, and I blog. And I have a resource that's a free resource hub of all things homeschooling. No matter which association you choose, it's information for if you're considering homeschooling or wherever you are along the journey. When you get to the high school phase and you have all new questions, I've got the answers that everybody's looking for. So
wonderful, and we'll make sure we share those resources as well with folks who are watching. If you had to define homeschooling, and I know when we use that phrase, people assume we know what we mean when we say homeschooling, that means teaching at home. But if you had to kind of bundle it up into one, just kind of succinct definition, if you can, how would you describe that to people? What is homeschooling?
my go-to definition for homeschooling is really it's a DIY way of educating your child. You take on the entire responsibility. I always say people are all part-time homeschoolers because we have 180 days of school that's required for attendance. And there's 365 days of learning that occurs. And so everybody's already a part-time homeschooler for the 185 days of the year that they're not sitting in school. And so when you decide that you're going to homeschool, you're just taking on the other 180 days. So, and then you're responsible entirely for it. So that's it. Yeah.
And since you bring that up and you talk about just kind of these 180 days and these seat time and things like that, how does that fit into a homeschool atmosphere? Are you required to identify and show that they're teaching their child for 180 days?
Right, that's when you register with an accountability of some sort, and there are 3 options in South Carolina for how you go about doing that. You can register with your local school district and have them still oversee your homeschooling. There's a process of registration through the school board. They approve your homeschool, and you give them some information about what curriculum you're going to use and different methods like that. And then they look at your lesson plans and record keeping periodically through the year. Or you can register with one of those 30 accountability associations. There's one, the first one that came into being is under its own code of law, so it's an option 2 by itself, and it's named SCAES, is named in the law that way. But then the law was reopened again and created a 3rd option, which allows any accountability association. And the Department of Ed lists all of those on their website. I have them on my blog as well, so that you can kind of compare and contrast and see what they're like, more than what just the contact information is that's on the Department of Ed website.
So when a parent is deciding to possibly go into homeschooling and they have to pick those accountability associations, or what advice do you have in terms of how do they choose? Which way should they go? What decisions should they look toward to make that choice?
Well, a lot of people start with just asking who they know that's already homeschooling. Who do you use for your accountability? And that's their first go-to. But I equate it to, like, how do you pick a doctor's office or a grocery store or a vet or whatever? You kind of have to figure it out for yourself based on what services they offer and what their personality is like. So reach out and contact some and find out what their answers are and how you feel they're giving you the help and guidance to get you going on the right path.
What are reasons parents are choosing homeschooling over traditional education or charter or private education?
Mm. Well, there's there's a zillion reasons. Sometimes they just want more family time together, that there's a disconnect that's going on in the family, and they choose that for, family reasons. That was one of my primary reasons why we chose to homeschool, um, so that, our kids would have a good bit of togetherness time and learn to get along with each other. Some people, just whatever's happening in the schools just aren't a one size fits all thing. Like, and teachers are busy. They can't get to every single child's individual thing that's going on. And so, just when you feel that whatever you're doing isn't working, for whatever reason it isn't working, what else is there? I go back to that grocery store illustration. Like, if you shop at a certain grocery store and it's not working there, you go to a different one. Like, it's a way to choose and tailor what works for you, just what works. And so, some people feel like their kids are either falling behind, or they're bored because the teacher has to keep everybody together. Like, they're just not getting challenged enough. And so, they can DIY that and focus on where their child is in different areas. And a lot of kids that are learning disabilities, they need just that one-on-one attention. That's a very good, way to get that done, because you can either do it yourself, or you can, supplement it with tutors and other programs that are specifically geared toward your child's needs and learning styles, and the way they learn. Some kids just need to get up and move every 15 minutes. Well, they can't let them do that in the classroom, where you can, structure your day in a way that makes more sense for your child to succeed at learning.
How do you respond to some of the questions that people may have regarding rigor and testing, and especially when you're doing homeschooling with some of your upper grades? I think people are often more comfortable with homeschooling when you are in your elementary level, but when you're getting into the more rigorous work and things like that, what does that look like in a homeschool environment? Is there rigor, and are they still, taking the same standardized tests and things like that?
Well, we don't have to do standardized testing with the public schools, but there are groups that do the standardized testing. There's resources online that you can do as well if you're looking to figure out where your child is, just to double check yourself to see where you are. I don't know anybody that's ever started homeschooling with a goal of I want my kid to be eating Doritos and playing video games on the couch when they're 40 years old. Parents have their child's best interest at heart. They want them to grow and succeed and learn. So the rigor is left up to the parent to decide that, based on where they are. And one of the examples that I always go back to is when you're, what you've done to get your child school ready in the first place. If you can potty train them, how do you know when they're ready to potty train? My daughter was practically changing her own diaper when she was 18 months old. And I was like, we could probably do something about this. An easier way for you, my dear. And then one of my other kids was nearly 4 years old before there was any interest in it. So it's there is cues and, what the child is ready to learn. Once they're ready to learn, just like you sit them on the potty and they're not ready to learn. I could have been fighting the child who was a late potty trainer for years. And, and so there's a lot of that you have to kind of figure out just by listening to the cues of your child and what they're ready for. And then pushing them ahead a little bit every time, here. And when you introduce new foods to them, I mean, these are the same kind of skills that you're doing with education in the educational realm, just by saying, here's some math, let's try this, and introduce them little by little. And when they're ready, they will take off.
Right.
The hang of it.
Connected to that, and it's been my experience when I've talked to people who homeschool, that oftentimes children are able to excel at even a much faster pace sometimes than when they're in a traditional classroom setting, and they're able to explore deeper options that things that interest them more. But in the event that, maybe like you said, they're at their own pace, they may not be as ready. And you mentioned, that accountability factor. Are there benchmarks that are passed down, even if it's not testing? Are parents still being held to a certain benchmark, like say, at third grade, you should be able to do this, or if fourth grade age, you should be able to do that? Or is it truly very much about that child's pace and where they are?
Really is individualized about where that child is, because we have kids that, like in math, are at a lower level, but they're in a reading at a higher level, and yet we still count them at a certain grade level age-wise where they would normally fit. When the parent is like looking at it and thinking they're missing some of these benchmarks, I feel like they should be getting it by now, then there are testing resources for learning disabilities. They can access that through the school district. The IDEA Child Find program is accessible for homeschoolers as well, and they can help identify what might be the learning delay and difficulty that's going on, and they can make recommendations of what kind of accommodations they would choose. But it gives the parents kind of a guide of where to go on their own if they choose not to use the school's assistance that way. But we also have independent testers that can do the Woodcock Johnson and other aptitude tests to see what they should be willing, and other IQ tests and things. We have independent consultants that do that as well. So you can figure out kind of, where your child is.
So you're talking about these different resources and consultants, and I don't, what is the cost associated with homeschooling, and if you needed to access those resources, and how can parents get support if there are major costs when it comes to testing and things like that, or curriculum, when it comes to books and materials?
Books, oh yeah.
Parents
Curriculum's a huge business. There's big money in curriculum, and we have conferences and conventions that the big vendors nationwide come and try to sell you on their program and why it works better than the one next to them and stuff. So the field of curriculum is so vast that you do have to kind of figure out what your personal style is for that, to work it down and then choose from the ones that work more in that kind of a philosophy. But the costs right now, we just have out of pocket. It's all DIY. And so that's why if they want testing at least initially started through the school district, that is a possibility. And there are some limited services that can be provided. Usually most of the school districts I talk to say it's speech services, but they can sometimes make accommodations for reading and other kinds of services as well. But it's all independent. You have to pay for it on your own, but a lot of people do that when their kids are in another school setting anyway. That's why Sylvan Learning Center and these other kinds of programs exist, because kids need additional help outside of the traditional school brick and mortar situation. And so, there's just even more resources like that are available with homeschooling.
Okay.
I try to put them all on my blog because they're hard to find. Google doesn't know what to tell you.
Right, and that's why I wanted to just kind of bring attention to this and try to further help, just my audience in terms of if they were considering homeschooling. And I know there's a lot of different questions and people think they know, but they may not know. And I know there's tons of information to dig through. And so I'm going to make sure that I also connect them to your blog and the information. Resources, since you live in the world of homeschooling the majority of the time. Are there co-ops where parents are exchanging information or even exchanging teaching resources, or if there's a parent who's stronger, say, in helping and supporting children when it comes to mathematics or science versus one that's more ELA and reading, are they working together in those ways?
Yeah, we have co-ops and resource centers, and they kind of just fall on a line of what they cost, really, because the resource centers are more like a drop-off program, tutoring kind of a thing where they can go usually once or twice a week. They sit in a class, and somebody who's pretty expert at a subject, say algebra, and they sit and they get, a, a an amount of teaching that goes along so they can go home, do their homework, they come back, they check it, and they do it again for the next week and get through some of those kinds of subjects like that. And then there are also what we call co-ops or cooperative learning centers and groups that the parents get together and they agree we're going to teach this together. So they might decide like on a certain science program or textbook or something to follow, and then they do their own lessons on whatever it is during the week, but then one of them volunteers to do the lab for everybody at the meeting that week, and then it's somebody else's turn the next week, and so they all take turns that way, so it keeps the cost down. And when you're putting together supplies for an art lesson or a science lesson, it's just adding a few more kids to it. Like you've gone to the effort to buy, a slab of liver to like look at it. Like you might as well have 8 kids poking at it and looking at it under a microscope instead of just your one. So it kind of helps us conserve our resources that way. And then, the parents are already available, so they just stick around and help pitch in and make the program work that way. So,
what's your response to people who are, or I guess critics of homeschooling, who say children lose like socialization and some of those interpersonal skills when they are taught in a homeschool environment versus being in a traditional school setting, or even when it comes to certain extracurriculars and sports and things like that, and they feel like maybe they're not getting exposed to that, and that's problematic. What is your response to that?
there's a variety of responses about that. That is actually one of the reasons a lot of people are choosing homeschooling, because of the kinds of socialization situations that are happening in the public school system, and bullying and just the kind of interpersonal relationship, because the nature of what's happening on social media and the dynamic of how they're socializing outside of schools interacts with what they're doing inside the schools. And I don't think we've figured out, it's a problem. We haven't figured out what to do with it. How to help the bullies not be bullies, and how to help the victims not be victims. I don't know. I don't know that I don't think anybody's got the answer about how to socialize our kids these days. And so some people are specifically choosing homeschooling because of that. And so then we also have people who are prone to being bullies, who've been kicked out, people who have been victimized, who are leaving that, and we've got them in our situations too. So we're working on those kinds of things as well, and how to manage what they're saying to each other online, and how does it affect us when we meet in real life. But they're not isolated. Like, I think that when people think of homeschooling, they think that means you sit in your house all day long at the kitchen table and you don't interact. You're a hermit now. That just isn't what is a reality of what homeschoolers are. They're out and about all the time. Like, it comes to a point in every homeschooler's like scheduling where they're like, we have to cut out some of these things. We have to stay home sometimes. Like, we are burning ourselves out because there are so many things that we can be out there doing. And there are, I can't say that that's everybody, because there are people who are also intentionally choosing homeschooling because they want to seclude their kids, and that's a different issue. So they want to get into a certain bubble that protects their kids, but I would argue that's the same thing for why you might want to choose, say, Christian school. I want them in this bubble, and you're like hyper protecting them against social influences, and it doesn't work that way either. So there's a balance for everything, trying to figure out what you want to do. I mean, and like I say, the goal is to have productive citizens. So like we are out there in encouraging our kids to get connected. That's why my blog is called The Connection, because I want us to be I want our groups to be connected with each other, and I want us to be connected to the resources that are available to us. So.
And I guess, the biggest thing and what we try to push with NIC education is getting parents to understand is it really is an individualized decision. It really is being able to look at that child and really recognize their specific needs. And, I look at homeschooling as one of those opportunities to truly customize and tailor education that you see fit. And
it is. And my story actually is the opposite. We started our kids in homeschooling, and we got to a certain point where it wasn't working for one of our kids, and we put her back in public school, and she graduated from public school. So it goes both ways. Some people come to homeschooling just for a period of time because they have a family situation, or the child is just struggling internally with some kind of anxiety issues or something, and this works for this time to heal them and get them ready to move on, and then they go back.
Yeah, I love that you make that point, is because trying to get parents to understand that our children are quite dynamic individuals, and they change, and what they need one year may not be what they need the next year. And I think we have to get comfortable in making those changes even from year to year. And I know sometimes it can be a lot, on a family to have to make different adjustments, but it's important that we kind of evaluate that and not feel like they have to, once you make an education decision, they have to stay in that type, and that you can't shift that. And it really does change, and who they are as, say, a third grader may not be who they're going to be as a sophomore in high school, and different things like that. So I do think that's an important point to make, that you have to just make those adjustments as you see fit. So
yeah.
So tell me again the resources that you have, and I'll make sure that the websites and everything show up. But talk about where people can go to get more information on homeschooling and ask some specific questions, perhaps to you or to others.
My blog is the South Carolina Homeschooling Connection, homeschoolingsc.org, and you can email me directly there through the website. I have a bunch of articles. If you can't find what information you're looking for, I can probably find an article that has the answer, or it's coming up. It's all in there. I've got a stack of to-dos of information constantly. But also just fun things to go do, really cool educational places to visit. I'm building a bigger repertoire of those kinds of articles as well, which are, useful whether you decide to homeschool or not.
Yeah. And I was going to say that I think, even as you mentioned, most of us are part-time homeschoolers anyway. Even if we're still sending our children to traditional school environments, we might pick the summer. I know for myself that, summer kind of is this hybrid summer school opportunity for me, and I become kind of homeschool mom over the summer and trying to find educational opportunities to engage my child in. And I don't want that, that summer slide to happen, and where they, kind of, I call it getting dumb. I know we don't want to call our children dumb, but sometimes I'm like, you get dumb over the summer. And I do, and I actually look towards some of those homeschool resources to be able to say, what can I do to, provide this enrichment over the summer, so that when they get back into school, they're ready to go. So I appreciate you for that. And I just want to make that known to parents that, again, even if you're not considering homeschooling now, or maybe not happen in the future, the resources can be great and a great supplement to whatever education option that you're using. Kim, is there anything else that you want to add that I haven't asked, or to share, or to talk about in terms of homeschooling for our parents who are out there watching?
I think we kind of touched a little bit. You had asked before about like what the requirements are, like the record keeping requirements. So the law is pretty specific about what they want to see as far as record keeping, not necessarily what the benchmarks are, but you should be doing some sort of lesson planning, or journaling, because some of us like make these plans and then we're like, oh, but this other thing came up, let's do that. And you like explore some other learning avenue that wasn't in your lesson plans. It's that teachable moment kind of a thing that is so great about homeschooling. And so if you're more prone to like veer off of your lesson plans, then you can journal it back so that you can document what your child was actually learning and involved in doing that day. Then you keep some samples of their work, so that mostly I say so they can see their own progress, because kids are natural. They want to compare themselves to others, especially if they have other siblings or they're in co-op situations. And they're like, I'm just a dummy. I don't know anything. The person to compare yourself to is not those people. It's this making progress. And so look at this math worksheet where you couldn't even write things in the right order here, and everything was wrong. And now look at this one that like you finished it like that and everything's right. They can see their own progress and kind of, learn, get that, what's the phrase? Growth mindset. That, yeah, you don't know this yet, but yeah. And the other thing then we do, record keeping wise, is to look back periodically over those lesson plans and over, what you've accomplished for the year, and kind of do like a semi-annual progress assessment of how things are going. It can be an official report card, and this subject is an A and a B and a C, but that is really more the way the schools speak to us as parents, how they're doing with our child in progressing. And it doesn't make that much sense to me to say, well, it's an A, because you've been there. But to look back periodically and see how are they doing and reassess goals is kind of a lifestyle of what we're trying to do in our whole lives. Like, I want to lose 10 pounds and clean out a closet. I set my goals. So like I keep a record every day in my little notebook of what I ate, what I weighed, that kind of thing. And you get lost in that. But periodically you have to look back and say, well, is this diet working? What do I need to reassess? What part is working? Like, take a picture or measure something, measure your arms or something, and see, the difference. Or, if you look at a picture of yourself 3 months ago, can I see a difference? Like, the scale might not be telling me that something has changed. And that's the same kind of thing with your lesson plans and your progress reports, that you're kind of just getting a different look, because we can get lost in like feeling like they're never going to learn anything. They've never accomplished anything. All they're doing is running around in circles. I know I've told them to put ED on the end of this word a zillion times and it's still not happening, and then you look back at some of the things they've already accomplished and you go, oh, they are learning, like, yeah. And so you can see, to me, the law is really specific, but it's like almost common sense. The way that like buckling my seatbelt is common sense. Yeah, the law says I have to buckle my seatbelt, but I'm not looking over my shoulder going, well, who's going to catch me if I don't? Like, if you kind of like look at it in that kind of way and say, this is what makes sense for my own benefit, like it's super easy to comply with the law. So.
And like you said, you're providing this great picture for your own child to even look at, and and to understand their progress and what they've actually done. So
yes, and encourage yourself on those days when you're like, maybe I should put them back in school. I'm screwing this up somehow. Like, right. We question ourselves as it like takes all of your parenting woes and magnifies them, because it's all you now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for enlightening us about homeschool education. I hope all of you out there watching that you take the time to look at some of the resources. Again, I will make sure that you have the specific links to access those resources. You can comment in the comment section of this video if you have any specific questions. Kim will also be following that, just to kind of check and see what you have to say and what any questions or concerns that you have. You can always reach out to me and go to our website at mysceducation.org and follow us also on Facebook. Thank you so much for taking time to watch the video, and thank you, Kim, for joining me today.
Well, thank you.